Good morning, everyone. We'll get started here in a couple minutes just to let folks get logged on, but good morning and welcome. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to our panel discussion on the new frontier, the future of public affairs education. My name is Sarah Renfrey. I'm currently serving as the president this year of NASPAA, and we're really excited to co-host this webinar with IRSPM. And our goal today is to explore how the field can evolve through the principles of positive public administration. This global conversation invites us to reimagine public affairs education for a more optimistic, resilient, and effective public sector. We have a terrific lineup this morning with our NASPAA Executive Director. We have Alessandro Cecchino from the University of Milan, Bert George from the City University of Hong Kong, and Nicole Humphrey, the University of Kansas. And again, like I said, Crystal Calarus, our NASPAA Executive Director. So what we're going to do today is we have 3 questions. We'll just rotate, and then we're going to reserve time at the end. So if you have questions along the way, just go ahead and put those in the chat. If you don't have questions, I will have a couple questions. And we have reserved about an hour of time together. So again, thank you so much for being here. And our first question today is just to each person of our panel will engage in these questions, but just introduce yourself. And then our first question is, how can positive public administration reshape the core mission of public affairs education to better cultivate optimism, resilience, and a commitment to the common good for future public service professionals? So I'm going to have Bert go ahead and start us off, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. Can you guys hear me well? Perfect. Okay, so it's now 9 p.m. here in Hong Kong. But luckily, before the session, I just exercised a little bit. That's why my head is still a little bit red, but I'm active for the webinar, no problem. So my name is Bert George. I am a professor at the City University of Hong Kong in Public and International Affairs. I'm also the associate dean there for international engagement. So I'm so happy to see that we have people here who are working in the US, in Europe, and in Asia. I mean, that's fantastic, and probably among the guests even more. I'm also editor-in-chief of Public Management Review, and I mostly work on strategic planning and neuro public administration, something new that we're also working on. So that's just quickly who I am. To really kind of go to the question that Sarah raised about positive public administration and what it could potentially mean for public affairs education, I would really pinpoint one thing, and that's especially, in my experience, the thing that most public professionals, public managers, policymakers who are doing public affairs education or who will soon be public managers and so forth, one thing they really struggle with is the belief that they can actually have impact, that they can actually change something for the better, that they have the self-efficacy to elicit change in a very complex world. And I think that that is really, for me, where positive public administration views can make the difference, right? Believing and seeing cases of successful governance and then being able to kind of re-engineer that success and apply it in your own setting. I think that's really, really powerful. So really giving people the self-efficacy, the tools, and the examples to show them that they can make a positive change. They can make things happen. I think that for me, that's really where a positive public administration, at least that perspective, can make a big difference in public affairs education.
Thank you, Gert. Crystal.
Hi, I'm Crystal Calaroos. I'm the incoming new executive director of NASPAA. I'm so excited to be here. My background is in accreditation. I was at NASPAA many years before, working on the accreditation side. I've worked at other accreditation agencies and I've led an international organization as well. My academic background is in also accreditation, regulatory space, nonprofit organizations, and equity issues. So happy to be here. This is a really good question, a great one to answer from the NASPAA perspective. And the NASPAA mission is about promoting the ideal of public service. So this is really at the heart of it. I think it's great to have this conversation about how we think intentionally about teaching for resilience and adaptability. Those have been top skills for the future for many, many years, and they are still at the top of what students will need into the future for success in their careers. It's what will help them keep them going when the challenges seem overwhelming. And the positive orientation that they learn through this, through these cases, through these examples, those are tools that they can take with them, thinking intentionally about what resonates with these students, not necessarily about what not to do, but how do they see themselves as problem solvers? And that orientation is critical for resilience. So they need to see these stories and see the challenges that others have faced to get that level of inspiration and to see the steps that others have taken. So that is going to support resilience throughout their career. They also need to be able to recognize positive stories and to be able to share examples of stories and lessons and help capture and recognize their own stories. I think that's an increasingly important aspect of being a public servant today that is more relevant than it has ever been. So if we focus on the negative stories, that's how students will learn to frame the issues. So they need to learn how to frame them in a positive manner so they can be able to communicate that to the public and share those messages to counter some of the negative narratives around public service. Thanks.
Thank you, Crystal. Alessandro?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, NASPAA. Thank you, IRSPM. It's an honor to be here with colleagues and friends like Bert. So Alessandro Sancino, professor at University of Milan. I do research mainly on social innovation and civic entrepreneurship from a public strategy perspective. And just 2 notes about my biography is that I was city councilor for 9 years, and I also founded a youth no-profit organization when I was quite young. So regarding the question, so my reaction is why not? So why? Of course, we do need a positive public administration, and it's probably quite tellingly that we are coming to talk about this just now. So strategy and is about studying success and superior performance, thanks to the fantastic work of people like Bert, John Bryson. The field of strategy is gaining traction, but we do need to study successes, because if we don't accept that there are successes, we have a discursive problem. Because of course we do have. So maybe there is somebody or mega discourses that are neglecting the role of government and public administration in enacting successes. And very quickly, I believe we do need to study success with a scientific approach, of course, because I do realize that public administration might be political, and actually in public administration started off by demarcating a territory outside partisan politics to protect institutions. So if I have to say one thing, we need to study success and positive PA with the scientific methods. And we do need to do that for 3 reasons. And then I stop talking. For learning, and we need to learn by using a scientific method. For inspiration, because of course positive stories do inspiration. And for excitement, because celebrating success can emulate others to do things and can excite those who were champions of that success. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nicole.
Yeah, so I'm Nicole Humphrey. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Public Affairs and Administration at the University of Kansas, and also the MPA director. But I've had a chance to engage with NASPAA a bit more this year, and I'm just incredibly excited to be here. So kind of thinking through this question of positive public administration, one thing is that I think about public affairs education, and it's always been a real champion for the work that public servants have done, which I think is great. But when I think about especially sort of these last couple years, there's a real need to continue to kind of champion that work. We have so many students that come through our program, and I mean, they are so passionate about public service work, right? Like the public service motivation, they believe it. You can hear it in the things that they say, the ways that they engage with the material. But at the same time, they have their experiences at work, the criticisms they see in the media, the politics of the time. And you can see that public service motivation at times start to get a bit shaken. And so when I think about sort of the importance of positive public administration, part of it, I think, is recognizing how many people we have that want to do such phenomenal service work and figuring out how we can maintain that desire to want to continue to do that work really long term. And so, with our own students, I think about, like what learning experiences show them the positive things that they can do because they already have that desire, but it's about kind of maintaining some ability to have that resilience and have those networks that they can stay in the work as long as possible. And so when I think about positive public administration, especially, in our coursework and in the materials that we share, so much of it, I think, is sharing with them opportunities to do that good work. And it comes with its challenges, but there are just sort of these continued opportunities to serve and engage with communities. Uh, and I think really feel as though that public service motivation still exists and still has so much meaning in our field.
Thanks, everybody. And for those of you who are just joining, thanks for being here. We just have a couple more questions and we're going to open up for questions from the group. So we're just super excited about our partnership between NASPAA and IRSPM. So the second question that we have this morning, I guess this morning on the West Coast of the US, is what innovative models or approaches translate into meaningful learning experiences for students across diverse global contexts? Crystal, how about we have you start off with this one?
Sure. I think there's 4 areas maybe I'd like to mention real quick. One, simulations and cases can be a great opportunity to showcase things that have happened in the past, but also allow students to choose their own adventures and finding those positive outcomes that can really reinforce their own role and their own authority within that decision-making context. That's cases and supporting cases has been a big strategic objective for NASPAA. Currently, NASPAA has a case study repository I would invite everybody to use. And it has the electronic hallway, Evans School cases, the Hubert Project, all those cases are now in one location, and we're building those over the next few years. So really exciting about that, or excited about that. But simulation and cases, I think, is one. Another is the human stories, examples, making it real and present, understanding history, what other people have done in other contexts, other times. That really helps with the messaging that you can do things because others have done them too under adverse circumstances, and they've been able to make or persevere and make the changes that they were hoping to make or be the public servant that they were hoping to be. I was recently introduced to the Virtual Museum of Public Service, which is online. What a fantastic resource. You may be very familiar with it already. It was new to me, just great stories and history of public administration that really brings things alive for students in a way beyond just the texts and the research as well. The third thing I think is the increasing importance of learning across borders. Comparative research and engaging in regional cases, that's always been an important part of public administration research, but as problems get bigger and more global, looking for examples of positive public administration outside of one's own context is increasingly important. I mean, we certainly wouldn't expect students to reproduce methods from other contexts, but rather to take relevant lessons, inspiration that can be applied to their own context and have that reflective lens. And I think the fourth thing is one that really has been important over the past couple of years in my own career thinking about this, is lifelong learning. I think, we really focus a lot on the foundational skills that students will get in our degree programs, and really setting them up for resilience and with the initial tools of analysis that they need throughout their careers. But to supplement Nicole's point about that need to support that energy and to make sure that they're not taking in all the negative messages. I think public servants need these messages and need this support throughout their careers. And so other fields like health and tech have really adopted lifelong learning strategies. And I don't think our field has done that in the same way. And so I think that's a really important door that our field can walk through, providing that support out of our schools, out of our research agenda for those current public service, encouraging an ethos of lifelong learning. People are really craving it, and showing success stories about recent events, I think is really helpful to public servants throughout their career, not just at the beginning.
Alessandra, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so again, three things. I believe we have a lot of potential in developing global common resources for teaching. So if we look at the emerging organizational model of platforms, potentially we should overcome organizational silos and developing all together global common educational resources centered around some topics and make them for free for usage to the world. I think this is important. So we academia started with textbooks. Now we have also MOOCs, other types of educational resources, but the good news is that they can be potentially free and we can co-produce those resources. The second point is around practice. I think we can attract students and empower them by potentially innovating in the way they do get in touch with public organizations. So internships or experiences for visiting PA offices, making experience in campaigns or public programs can be very, very important. And also potentially developing projects around making gaming solutions and simulations. So when I was younger, there was SimCity. So now, which is a video game where you were supposed to design a city. So now we are trying to develop a kind of learning tool where you play like if you were a mayor in a city, but like if it was a video game. So this is the second keyword. And the third point is again about partnerships. So we have a lot of potential in partnerships. So if there is a fantastic professor in South Africa or in Asia or in Europe, if you connect another class in another part of the world, now we can do that, and we can assist to that lecture where there is a professor specializing in one topic, and we can do the same in another part of the world. So we can do a lot of partnerships thanks to the new technology, and I think we should do more initiatives like this one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Nicole.
Yeah, so I think one thing that I always try and emphasize for our students is emphasizing the human component of this work. And it's one of those things where I think as a faculty member, I have to remember that a lot of times myself. And so what that sort of meant, I think, for our program over kind of this past year, especially, is what are the opportunities that we give to students to really engage with practitioners? So we have, like our incoming students that tend to come in right from undergrad, and we also have kind of more career students who have been working in the field for a while. But for those students that are just coming in for undergrad, we really push them to engage with practitioners. And so one assignment that they have is, when they go to ICMA, the conference, they have to interview so many current practitioners from the field. And when they come back and they sort of share those interviews with them, I mean, you just see them come alive. But I think what's really important in those interview settings is that, they come in with these rose-colored glasses of the work is going to be great, it's going to be fun, it's going to be glamorous, if you will. And it's not that the practitioners take away that glamour, but one thing I've seen them kind of point out is the importance of, how do you cope with the stresses? What are the challenges I'm going to face? How do I brush things off that might prevent me from wanting to continue to do this work? And so I think in kind of emphasizing those, those human elements, those human connections, those human networks, one thing that especially kind of our younger students have learned is the importance of recognizing opportunities to cope, recognizing opportunities to rely on your colleagues and build a foundation that'll hopefully make you very resilient to sort of the difficult challenges that you might face in your work. Along with that, something else that I think has kind of been a focus is identifying opportunities to let students be creative and hopefully get some hands-on work. And so, one example I think of is, teaching data analysis right now. The goal is that hopefully we will find a local government that is going to eventually let us do an employee satisfaction survey. And it's just one of those small things where the students, you see the creativity, you see the engagement and wanting to ask questions to people that are currently doing the work. How can the organization change and evolve? Those sorts of things. You see them, I would say, thinking like a manager in sort of developing these survey questions of wanting to kind of improve the workplace setting for someone else. And so, those are kind of the important parts to me. But overall, I think that sort of falls in this broader umbrella of how do we continue to highlight the very human aspects of this work for people?
And Bert, thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm getting so much good ideas to implement. So thank you, colleagues. That's great. I want to highlight maybe two specific things. First of all, I agree with what has been said about the potential of the metaverse and simulations and using digital tools and engaging with practice. Allow me to kind of highlight that element engaging with practice a bit more. For me, practice isn't only about engaging with real life practitioners, it's also about the doing of stuff. And this is an important philosophy in how I have taught, especially strategy. So I've had the luxury of teaching strategy to public affairs students basically across the globe and at all levels, from undergraduates to masters to MPAs, in Hong Kong, in Berlin, really kind of all over the place. And the one thing that I have found that always motivates people is purpose. But it's not up to me to tell them what their purpose is. They have to find it. So what I mean with that is the assignment that I always use at all levels, even for people who are already very seasoned public managers, I basically ask them in the strategy course to identify a societal issue and develop a strategy for a nonprofit that would try to basically tackle that issue. So they have to go through all the steps. They develop a business model, a mission, vision, issues, analyses, all these different steps. But they pick the issue. And I have just been so inspired in terms of seeing the solutions that people come up with. So to give you guys just one example of the crazy things that happen when you use this approach, I was teaching a strategy course, which was actually at in Hamburg, but in a master program that's linked to NATO. So this is a master program about military civic interaction. Most of the students are working in the military, especially in European militaries, or high level officers, right? So I asked them, don't develop a strategy for your defense or the military or your organization. Think about an issue in your community and what you would do. And then you have these officers who were thinking about, well, in Berlin, there are these big concrete blocks in the public scene that are actually aimed at stopping terrorism. So the blocks are put there so that big trucks cannot drive into Christmas market and stuff like that. But the blocks look awful. So people see them, they feel unsafe. It creates a very bad atmosphere. So they developed a business plan about how they would be able to add flowers and greenery to these blocks, right? These very serious officers were thinking about flowers on concrete blocks. And these are the beautiful things that can happen when you find people's purpose. So I fully agree, engage with practitioners, real life cases, but also allow people to actually do the stuff and imagine and re-envision and think about how can we tackle a specific problem and then go through all these steps. I think that's really really crucial. The practice, the doing of things. It does require a bit of a different approach. It's not just about teaching, it's a lot about coaching. So you will explain the theory and then you really have to coach the groups to be able to kind of take the necessary steps. But I have really found that to be a very effective way to teach strategy by letting them do strategy.
Great, thanks. So this is our final question. And then, like I said, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat, or we have a small enough group this morning or this afternoon or evening, wherever you live, to engage in some good questions with our panel today. So our final question is, as the public sector faces increasingly complex and uncertain environments, what competencies and mindset should public affairs programs prioritize to prepare graduates for leadership that is constructive, collaborative, and future focused? Nicole, would you like to start us off?
So the first thing that I kind of thought of when I saw this question was the importance of people knowing how to build their network. Because networks are oftentimes associated with people that are more resilient in their workplaces. And so when we see people that are well networked, that are connected and know other people in their organization, we tend to see less turnover, less absenteeism. We see more satisfaction with the work. At the same time, as we kind of have this increasingly kind of hybrid virtual workplace, we see the difficulties in people being able to establish those networks. And so one thing that I think is important to sort of stress is how do we go about building connections with people? How do we go about building networks that can hopefully help support us in the work that we're doing, help us be able to answer questions and solve problems in our organization more quickly, because we don't feel like we necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. And so, the story that I always tell is I had a student who was one of our MPA students and starting off in sort of this hybrid workplace, ran into a problem. And I think we were meeting on class on like a Wednesday. And I asked him how his job was going. He's like, I've just ran into a problem. So I've kind of just been sitting on it for a few days. And I was like, what does sitting on it mean? Like you've just been hanging out for a couple days, like thinking and thinking about how to solve this rather than just asking someone for help in your organization. But I think it was this issue of he didn't feel connected enough with the people that he worked with to go and say, hey, I don't know how to do this just yet. And so I think there's an element here of, teaching students how to network, but also teaching students how to mentor, engage, and kind of be inclusive of new incoming members as well. The other thing that I think is really important to stress here is the importance of kind of reinvigorating, our teaching and our work on collaboration. This is becoming sort of increasingly important that students have the ability to sort of navigate in between multiple agencies and recognize the challenges that come with collaboration. And so I think part of that is, yes, diving into the collaboration literature that we have, giving people a language for the steps in the work that they're doing. But I also think it extends a bit beyond that, and that we need to have more kind of conversations around negotiation, mediation, and just like general communication skills. And so while we're doing that, I think a very important part is allowing students to sort of practice what those encounters look like. If it is through kind of media means of watching council meetings, if it is actually assigning people or groups into different roles and saying, solve this problem, but you each have a different agenda. You each have different motives of what's bringing you to this table, and you need to come to a common agreement. I think that's part of it. And then also kind of to what Bert said, I think this leads into that side of, as educators, we have to also be willing to get into kind of a coaching mindset. The first time I did sort of this collaborative negotiation encounter in class where I assigned, people roles and they needed to work through it, I learned very quickly that I needed to get my coaching skills in that scenario up to par much faster. Because there was feedback that needed to be provided as we were going through the activity. And so I think that's something for us as educators to work on as well, is absolutely this idea of sort of coaching people through scenarios, being able to point things out of, maybe I would tweak what you say here. Are you really looking at what this group is asking for over here? Or are you kind of stuck in sort of your own point? But I think there's opportunities for students here, but I also think there's a lot of opportunities for faculty for us to sort of ask ourselves what we could tweak about our teaching, or what we could add to it to sort of support them in these new work environments.
Thanks, Nicole. Bert.
Yeah, I fully agree with what Nicole also said, but I have to add something, right? I can't just say I agree. I would want to add probably three things to that question. I think the first one is probably the most obvious answer you would expect of me, right? People have to be able to think, act, and learn strategically. I think is more important than ever, which also means not just being able to use the tools that we apply, but also being able to configure tools in such a way that it fits the purpose at hand, right? I think lots of people look at public affairs and public management or strategy as like a one size fits all, off the shelf. We have a tool, we use it, perfect. The problem is solved. And I think a lot of public affairs professionals will have to be able to think as designers who can configure an approach and a tool in such a way that it helps them. I see so many people, for instance, do a SWOT and then they get so frustrated, but they still do a SWOT because, well, we have to do it. And then it becomes a strategic waste of time. And that's not really very purposeful. So I think being purposeful and being able to configure an approach to meet the purpose at hand is a very important skill moving forward. Again, that's expected. Now, the second thing is probably the question that I get the most when I'm teaching about strategy in public affairs, especially for people with some experience. That is the relation between politics and administration. And this ties a bit with what Nicole said about being able to collaborate. I think that public affairs education is going to have to embrace the idea that reshaping mandates and influencing mandates to some extent could be an important skill of a future public manager. What does that mean? I leave it up to your imagination, but it means that we as public administration, this builds on what Alessandro also said, we are the guardians of public value. That also implies that we should be able to shape our mandate a bit more to make sure that we can create and continue to create public value. But how do you do that? There are tools for political management out there. There are approaches out there. And I think that that's going to become increasingly important as well. And then the third thing, and we didn't talk about AI yet. That actually feels good for once. No one has mentioned AI yet. I'm happy about that. But so I have to mention it now. I think that the human element is going to become really important. Now, what do I mean with that? I think our education is going to move a bit from large N population approaches towards approaches where the individual being is much more considered the case. This is kind of also the neuro public administration stuff that we're doing, right? We're looking inwards inside a human being, often spatially and temporally, and trying to understand what makes them tick. And knowing how AI is influencing big data, is influencing opinion surveys, and all these kind of large N approaches out there, I think that human dimension is going to also become increasingly salient in the future. So yeah, I think those three things would be the most important for me.
Alessandro?
Yeah, thank you. I too agree on what already Bert and Nicole said. I just named three things. The first is social and civic entrepreneurship and innovation. Like Bert was saying, using the non-profit example, I believe widening PA programs into social and civic entrepreneurship can build a tactical bridge with the world of business, but shifting economic activities into public purpose. And the civic element, I think, it's very important, especially to highlight the bottom-up approach, which is typical of democratic approaches towards the creation of public value. And so this is the first one. The second one, and related to my element mentioning democratic approaches, is we need to teach political astuteness and the possibility also to practice resistance towards something which civil servants deem not to be right for public value. And like Nicole, probably relying upon networks of friends and colleagues might be important here, because it might be psychological distressful saying no to a master politicians, but the ability to resist is also something we should, I believe, put into the conversation for preserving democratic futures. And the third one, of course, again, like Bert was saying, is technology. We cannot neglect the power of coding, of artificial intelligence, of digital democratic practices. And we need to bring it into the agenda and fully exploit it for public value. So overall, I would say those three things. So social and civic entrepreneurship for leveraging that deep sense of purpose and linking it into real places, neighbors, villages, technology. And the third one, political astuteness to protect the institutions we have built so far, but at the same time, again, like Bert was saying, political astuteness in a more reformist and progressive way, updating mandates, because the societies are changing, and so we need also gently to let public institutions to co-evolve with societies. Again, the bureaucratic model is still very useful for some public mandates, but not for others. So we need also to think about new organizational models, hackathons. So in Europe, we have developed civic hackathons to come out with solutions against the COVID-19 virus. So there are new organizational models. I don't like actually equating government with bureaucracy. So I believe public administration as a field of study is not just about bureaucracy, luckily. Okay.
And Krista?
Well, I think my colleagues have really eloquently laid out some of the curriculum areas that we need to focus on. I agree. I agree with all of you. certainly on the human skills piece, this is where my mind went to, of course, the things that technology cannot do or cannot do well, or I assume will still play a very human role in public administration moving forward in terms of emotional intelligence, looking at some of the very classic elements of public administration curriculum in terms of like ethics and values to inform decision making. They've always been part of public administration or public policy education, but they're more important than ever of helping students to navigate some of these things that are happening to them, to the constituents that they might deal with. The second thing is technology, harnessing the tools so that they are not harnessed by the tools of automation, big data, AI, all of these things. And the third for me is managing information and communicating positive narratives. The public square right now is very noisy. It's very difficult to send a positive message about what they do and the successes that they're having. And being able to do that, I think, will help sustain them over the life of their careers.
Well, thanks again to our panelists for our first of hopefully many webinars with our partnership here. But we just wanted to open up for questions that folks, again, thanks for joining whatever time zone that you're in. This was really important for us to embark on this to start off our week this week. But what questions do folks have? Feel free to put something in the chat, or feel free to go ahead and just raise your little yellow hand on Zoom. But what questions do you have? We have a great group of panelists today. And we have about 15 minutes left. So please, any questions that you might have. I guess one question that I have that came up based upon the conversation this morning is about civic courage. And you each talked about it on different facets, talking about the human element of public administration. You know, it's hard to navigate sometimes with all the noise. But what about civic courage? And so, what are you doing maybe in your research or teaching or as an executive director about thinking about this notion of civic courage? So, anyone feel free to jump in on civic courage.
So I can jump in here. I teach a class on organizations, organizational behavior, but I always feel as though that topic takes a very different lens when you're teaching it relative to public sector work. And a major part of that is because I think the decisions in the public sector have such unique implications for communities. And I think that's where these conversations around civic courage a lot of times can start to come in. And so in that class, one thing is, we can spend a lot of time sort of, talking about, theory X and theory Y of motivation. But the other thing we try and spend a lot of time talking about are what are the challenging decisions that managers, public administrators might find themselves needing to make. And so I'll a lot of times bring in interviews that I have conducted with people working in local government where I would say they have found themselves in a situation that took a lot of courage to have what is a ethical outcome, that kind of supports public values of the field, like accountability and transparency and all of these other important things. It was something where, maybe it took a lot of effort on their part to make sure those things happened, but sort of walking students through their decision-making process, providing opportunities to ask questions about what are the challenges that they faced. And then another area where I think about kind of civic courage and where these conversations can really come up is around discussions around accountability. When we think about accountability work, a lot of times I think where it comes up is when there has been some sort of tragedy that has occurred, and we are looking for someone to be held accountable or someone to answer for what happened. And a lot of times when we look at sort of these big accountability cases, I'm even thinking about, Romzek and Dubnik, there were times where, the administrators were there and were saying, this is an issue, this can't go forward. But we weren't able to sort of get that communication through. And so I think part of sort of this conversation around, civic courage is this element of how do we communicate our messages of this is an issue that we see as, administrative experts in this area. How do we go about sort of shaping potentially the decisions of elected officials, or at least engaging the community in a way where they can learn about the administrative processes that are showing why a decision may not be the most effective, or why we might need to pivot from what we were doing before. And I think a lot of that can kind of, bring back sort of important cases. I think about, the Flint water crisis being a big one, where there were so many administrators trying to stop that situation from happening. Truly, like they were trying so hard to stop this. And that took a lot of courage to be able to try and step in and say, we know something's wrong here. How do we prevent this from going forward? And so I think showing students kind of, there are administrators that are willing to step up to this plate. It is a scary plate to step up to, but they are doing it because they're trying to protect communities, is really important.
Thanks. Cool. Bert.
Yeah, I agree certainly with what Nicole said. One thing that I have in mind is the book, and I think most of you know it, from Rosemary O'Leary about the ethics of dissent, guerrilla government. I think it's called. Right, it's an
And she has
amazing book.
she has a new edition coming out too.
Oh, really? Oh, fantastic! And I really love that book because when I teach about this type of thinking, if it's a strategy class, it really links with the mandate analysis and this idea that yes, you can actually shape your mandate more than you think sometimes, right? And that's an important skill to have and to train, and it requires a lot. But when I teach a public management course, so more general, I kind of talk about this as the dark side of public management, but by which I mean, and in the European tradition, the public administration, like Alessandro said, the traditional bureaucracy, Weberian thinking, right, neutrality, all that type of stuff, it's really embedded in lots of European cultures. So the question is kind of and this is a tightrope. That's why I say it's the dark side, right? So there are instruments and tools that you have that you can use in cases where it's ethical to show some dissent. To bring back to that, so we have agenda management, risk management, symbolic management. These are all tools that can be used by public managers to put issues on the forefront on the political agenda. And I do teach about that. I give them examples, and I all very practical examples, and then we kind of have a debate about what does all of this mean. So I think if it's about civic courage, ethics can never be detached from talking about civic courage. And I think giving students the tools and the approaches to make an ethical reflection about an issue they are confronted with, analyze that, understand that, and then providing them the tools to, if necessary, try to do something about that, understanding also the risks. I think that's an important part of civic courage. That's certainly something that I've tried to teach.
And no pressure. Any other thoughts from Crystal or Alessandro?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing up the term civic courage. Especially, I will focus on the civic side of it, because it's something I do like and I have been working on. And civic is both meaning citizen, being a citizen, and also it is linked to something municipal. Okay, so it's not just being a citizen. It's about a municipality, so a public local institution. So in my research, actually, I have always had a kind of bias, so I acknowledge it, because I have been studying mostly local public organizations. And so I like in the term civic the fact that sometimes we should look at government from the bottom up and not from the top down, because local authorities, municipalities, towns, villages are closer to our communities. And sometimes a word of local communities can be less dangerous than a word of nation states. So I like that element in the civic definition. And the other two meanings, which I would like to pinpoint, are so the first one was closer. I remember a conversation with John Bryson, and he mentioned Madison, the fourth US president, and a federalist view of government. So I will need to study a little bit more, but let's talk about the government from the bottom up, not always from the top down, especially from PA perspective, which is not strictly a public policy perspective. And so the second element is, again, civic courage in being entrepreneurially and collaborative with all those who would like to create value from a civic perspective. So even local businesses, no profit. So that's why how I use the notion of civic courage in my courses. And the third notion is again related to engaging, like it was said, citizens to build new public institutions through co-production of public services. And here it comes to my mind Alexis de Tocqueville, a philosopher, that actually pinpointed how important it is for democracy, letting people experience democracy also in school councils, neighbor watches, local councils. So thank you for this term, because I believe we are in an era of distrust, but if we approach the public sector from the local scale, I'm not sure that there is the same distrust, because sometimes you see the local politicians and are those who do this for voluntary reasons or do this as a service to the community. So again, looking at the government from the bottom-up perspective, I believe it's very useful, and a civic level of analysis in that respect might be very, very useful. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'm going to pose our final question to Crystal before we convene today, just because she has such a great, and our convening today, just because she has a great knowledge on just kind of the accreditation side and through a global lens. And so we have a question in the chat. Crystal, if you could just share a little bit about, internationalization of MPA curricula. Our colleague here is from the University of West Scotland, where they have a 100% international student cohort. Any reflections you can share on preparing globally minded public leaders with a decolonized curriculum would be greatly appreciated.
Oh, that's a great question. So, in terms of the accreditation standards, if you're thinking about those as a framework, those are competency based. So the idea is that the competencies are expansive enough that they allow for some expression in each different context that you might come to achieve those. So I think that those are a good framework to start from. And then to work backwards and to see how those might be expressed in each context using cases outside of maybe the traditional set of cases that would normally be used for a particular program, using those cases from different regions around the world, showing those types of examples, teaching the history of public administration in different contexts, how ethical approaches happen, how strategy, going back to some of Bert's comments, how strategic decision making is done in different contexts. Those types of things really can help inform the curriculum and students to go back to their own context or to work together. Another fundamental element of the NASPAA accreditation standards is public service values. And so there's some suggested values of the field has sort of agreed to, but also the idea is that each school, each faculty, each group will determine its own public service values in the context of its own stakeholders. So its own public administrators that relate to the program, the students that might come in, the faculty that are there, the researchers, and developing that together. So in this case, with such an internationalized student body, that's an opportunity for those students to inform the values of the program, which then go back to inform the competencies and how those would be expressed and what those students need to learn. So I guess that's sort of a broad question or a broad answer, but it is an overall framework for thinking about how to move forward in internationalizing a curriculum.
Great. Well, we're about out of time. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that this is one of many conversations that we have with our partnership between NASPAA and IRSPM. And just thank you so much to our panelists. And thank you to Wallace Grant, who helped to organize the webinar. And we hope that you all have a good evening or good morning wherever you live. And just thank you so much for joining us. And we will share this on our channels. For those of you that maybe were not able to join us today, we will share out through our channels. So we hope you have a good rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good to see you
Bye-bye.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.